Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining me at this conference. It's great to be out of the house and in front of a large group of people again. My name is Molly Wade, and I'm the founder and CEO of Barologics. Barologics is a neuromodulation company focused on developing a closed-loop baroreflex system to treat an initial indication of uncontrolled high blood pressure. As many of you know, a predominant feature of uncontrolled high blood pressure is diminished signaling from the baroreflex to the brain. At Barologics, we intend to use electricity as medicine to restore that signaling back to its native function. I'm happy to report that we've now done a 10-patient first-in-human study. We were traveled to Warsaw, Poland before the pandemic really got going and borders shut. We tested 4 patients and saw an average drop of 63 millimeters of systolic pressure. We then came back to Case Western University and have treated 6 patients and have seen in 5 of the 6 patients a 40 millimeter drop in systolic pressure. So really huge drops compared to what's being developed in the market today. We are truly a platform technology. We intend to build the Barologics device once and use it for uncontrolled high blood pressure, but also believe it could be used for both etiologies of heart failure as well. And lastly, the Barologics device has favorable economic profiles. We believe that this technology can not only benefit patients who are at increased risk of stroke and heart failure, can basically help physicians because we know they're looking for new tools in their tool chest to treat uncontrolled high blood pressure, can help our healthcare system, which is overburdened by hypertension, and certainly provide a nice return to Barologics investors as well. As many of you know, the hypertension space is extremely large and a large unmet need. About 70% of Americans have high blood pressure, but nearly 1 in every 2 don't have their blood pressure under control. We believe that hypertension is not a one-size-fits-all approach. We believe that renal denervation is looking very promising and likely to hit the market, but even with renal denervation in place, we believe the Barologics device offers a $25 billion market opportunity. So early in the last 4 years, we've been really focused on the foundational work to set the company up for success. And this included a lot of anatomical research, and now we feel like we're on that road. The carotid sinus nerve is easy to access. You do a small 4-centimeter transverse incision, and you can safely place this electrode. We anticipate that the early implanters for this will be vascular surgeons. They can do the incision and place the electrode in 20 minutes, and then tunnel down to the custom implantable pulse generator for roughly 1-hour procedure. The therapy also is unique in that we offer target activation of 100% of the baroreceptor afferent fibers. Because we can place an electrode directly on the nerve, we can steer that current and get immediate drops in blood pressure and heart rate. The therapy is also unique in that we have an on-off demonstration of response. And so when I show you the clinical data later, basically when we put energy to the carotid sinus nerve, you see immediate biomarker of effect. So immediately we drop heart rate and blood pressure, and when we shut the therapy off, that blood pressure and heart rate rebounds, proving it's the therapy and therapy alone responsible for the drops in pressure. The therapy also offers a dose-response relationship, and I think this is also very unique in that physicians have the opportunity to personalize therapy for each one of their patients. If physicians and a cardiologist have been treating a patient that has systolic pressure for over 200 for the last 10 years, just because you can stimulate the nerve and drop pressure 60 millimeters of mercury doesn't necessarily mean they want to do that. And this therapy allows them to slowly titrate the dose of therapy to drive each patient to goal. And we also believe in rigorous, double-blind, sham-controlled studies. We're actually planning to use patient as their own control, which was a similar model that Inspire Medical used in 2014 for their PMA approval. We believe using patient as their own control drives capital efficiency and still allows us to get the results needed for commercialization. So the baroreflex, it's a very well understood mechanism of action. Basically, every time the heart beats, it sends out a pulse. And baroreceptors are stretch receptors. The stretch receptors sense this pulse, and they send signals to the brain. Basically, at Barologics, we're harnessing the power of the brain. We're restoring that signaling back to its native function and allowing the brain to determine what it needs to do to decrease blood pressure. And what we see is that the brain essentially vasodilates blood vessels, decreases heart rate, and increases diuresis, all which leads to decreases in blood pressure. So the Barologics therapy platform is not only precise, proprietary, but it's also intelligent. This was a picture of the anatomical research we had done, and we pointed here with the arrow to the carotid sinus nerve. When we found and did this early anatomical research, we found the CSN was actually a flat nerve structure. So we worked with the group at Case Western University, their experience in neural interfaces, and we've designed the C-Fine electrode. It's the composite flat interface nerve electrode. And what it is, it's essentially a book. And we basically take and close this book around the carotid sinus nerve. It's a multipole electrode, and it allows us to independently select which electrode is closest to the nerve fascicles, making the therapy not only effective, but also efficient and very well tolerated. The therapy is also intelligent in that we will be detecting heart rate, and it allows us to detect heart rate, and as patients ambulate and their activity levels increase, we automatically adjust the dose of therapy each patient receives. So it's not a set it and forget it type of therapy. We actually program and automatically adjust to what the patient's activity levels are. This was the data we previously talked about, but it was went to Poland, and we actually piggybacked on 4 patients that were undergoing an endarterectomy procedure. So these patients were already indicated for a carotid artery procedure. We basically placed our off-the-shelf electrode and turned stimulation on. What we saw was patients were actually awake in Poland, so the pressures were much higher than you might see in the operating room in the US. But with 195 systolic, we turned stimulation on and dropped pressure down to 127. We then shut stimulation completely off and allowed patients to rebound, looking for that steady state. When patients reached a steady state, we turned stimulation back on and dropped pressures down to 108 systolic. At that point in time, the surgical and anesthesia team put up a big stop sign. We turned stimulation off and looked for that rebound, and we saw that back to 171. So an average in these 4 patients was a 63 millimeter drop in systolic pressure. We were really excited about the data we'd collected and came back to Case Western with our proprietary electrode. And again, in 6 patients, we saw responses in 5 of the 6 patients. Pressures were lower because these were under general anesthesia. Pressures were 148, we turned stimulation on and dropped an average of 40 millimeter systolic, and then we shut stimulation off and looked for that rebound, which we saw in all of these patients. Barologics is well protected. We have an exclusive license with Case Western University on that C-Fine electrode. I also traveled to Osaka, Japan, and licensed intellectual property algorithms for a self-programming closed-loop system. And then we filed our own patent application as well with the closed-loop applications. So currently, Barologics is raising $15 million in a Series B financing. That $15 million will be used to build an internal team of people, develop our chronic system, so both the chronic electrode and chronic implantable pulse generator, and then test that in the United States in an early feasibility study of 15 patients. I'm happy to report that just recently we received a strategic term sheet that will be leading this round, and with our existing investor-backed KCK MedTech, we're looking for one additional syndicate to round out our Series B. So happy to meet with anybody after this and address any questions that you might have. Thank you.